I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting my body sag with exhaustion. Every muscle seemed to scream for rest. It had been one of those days that drained me to my core, even by the standards of my unusual profession. Today, 13-year-old Jason, a boy with severe autism, managed to stay in the saddle without support for 10 minutes for the first time. A small victory, but a significant one. My chest tightened with the mix of relief and pride. And before that, there was baby Amber, relearning how to coordinate her tiny movements after her stroke, and veteran Freddie, whose deep, lingering post-traumatic depression was slowly giving way to hope under the careful guidance of my horse, Flitter. Horses heal. I've known this for 43 years, ever since I brought my first patient to her first therapy horse. It seems so simple, really. A person, a horse, and the quiet space between them filled with trust. And yet, every day I feel like I'm carrying a mountain on my shoulders. I kicked off my shoes in the hallway and made my way to the kitchen. Kettle, cup, tea bag. The motions were automatic, but comforting. Outside, Bethlehem was slowly sinking into evening light. The city bathed in a gentle golden glow. From my modest 9th-floor apartment, I had a view that always grounded me. The park below, the old church spires in the distance, the silhouettes of rooftops fading into the dusk. The view brought memories, too some sweet, some aching. Memories of Harren, gone 6 years now. 39 years together, and he had been my anchor, my voice of reason. The calm in every storm. Even in his last days, when my voice failed me, he remained steady, patient. Adeline, he used to say, if you look at your patients as harshly as you do yourself, they'd scatter on the first day. I smiled at the memory, letting it warm me as I sipped my tea. Dinner waited, though I barely had the energy to think about cooking. I stared out the window, thinking about the same things I always did. My work that I loved, the apartment that held decades of life, and the emptiness where Harren used to be. The doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, breaking the silence of my evening. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone, and almost never had visitors. Neighbors rarely called. My friends always gave notice. Delivery people always rang beforehand. Unease settled over me like a cold blanket as I set my tea aside and walked to the door. When I opened it, I blinked, taken off guard. A man and a woman stood there, neatly dressed. He held a bottle of wine. She carried a bouquet of lily. It took a moment for recognition to click. My son, Otis, and his wife, Nefa. "Mum," Otis exclaimed, voice bright and exaggerated. "We decided to stop by and check on you." I stared at them, silent. 7 months had passed since our last meeting, since that uncomfortable Christmas dinner when Nefa spent the entire evening criticizing my choices, and Otis checked his watch every 15 minutes. That visit, like so many before, had ended, with a request to borrow money for something they claimed they couldn't live without. That time it had been a ski trip. "Come in," I said, stepping aside, masking my hesitation. I was just about to make dinner. "Oh, Mum, don't worry," Nefa chirped, stepping into the apartment and glancing around critically. "We brought groceries. I'll cook everything myself." I noticed the expensive supermarket bag in Otis's hand. Groceries? Cooking? Something felt off. In 15 years of marriage, Nefa had never once volunteered to cook at my house. She always found a reason not to accept food I offered, often complaining about it afterward. "What a surprise," I said, following them into the kitchen. 2. "What do I owe this attention?" "No, Mom," Otis said, waving a hand dismissively, as he poured wine into glasses that Nefa had already found in my cupboard. "We just missed you, didn't we, darling?" Nefa smiled, her enthusiasm clearly practiced as she sorted through the groceries. "Of course, we don't see each other much. Work, business, family, those are the most important things." Family. The word sounded bitter when it passed her lips. Harren had often remarked that she saw family as a tool to achieve her goals. She collected people the way others collected status symbols, always calculating, always maneuvering. Otis had changed too. My son, once a boy who dreamed of working with horses like me, was now a wind turbine inspector, choosing the path solely for the pay. And even that, it seemed, was never enough. "How's work, Mom?" Otis asked, handing me a glass of wine. "The usual," I replied, letting my voice remain steady. "Patients, horses, paperwork. Yes, I'm still at the same clinic." "Have you thought about retirement?" Nefa asked, chopping vegetables with a speed and precision clearly meant to impress. "At your age, many people would already be on vacation." "They want me to retire," I said quietly, hiding my irritation. "I like working. People depend on my work. It's not easy to find a qualified hypnotherapist in this town." "But you're not young anymore, Mum," Otis said, his concern fake but familiar. "We worry about you horses, all that physical work." I stifled the urge to remind him that when he had broken his leg 3 years ago, I had nursed him for 2 weeks while working full-time. "I'm perfectly fine," I said firmly. "Why don't you tell me how you're doing? Did something happen?" "Why something?" Nefa rolled her eyes dramatically. "We just came to see you, didn't we, sweetheart?" Otis nodded, though I noticed him tapping his fingers nervously on the table, a gesture from childhood signaling the halai was near. Dinner passed with strange tension. Nefa prepared an elaborate quinoa and exotic vegetable dish, clearly meant to flaunt sophistication. Otis asked carefully rehearsed questions about my health, neighbors, future plans. Both laughed at my jokes and nodded at my every remark, but the air felt artificial. My thoughts drifted back to Harren. When he was alive, Otis and Nefa had kept their distance. He saw through them immediately, refused to be manipulated. But since his death, their visits had grown more frequent, first under the guise of care, then under financial pretexts. Each time I had given a little, hoping they would learn responsibility. Yet something in their manner tonight told me they were up to something bigger. "How's your new car?" I asked casually, testing. 3 months ago, they boasted. About an expensive SUV purchased on credit. They exchanged a glance. Anxiety flickered across their faces. "Great," Otis said quickly. "Gasoline is expensive though," Nefa added, feigning nonchalance. I nodded, pretending to believe her. But their story didn't fit. They'd never complained about money before. After dinner, Nefa insisted on doing the dishes, and Otis wandered to the living room, pretending interest in the pictures on my walls. Our wedding, little Oddies on his. First horse, family holidays. "Do you remember this day, Mom?" he asked, pointing to the picture of the day we received the keys to this apartment. "Of course," I said softly. It had been a happy day. My parents had decided I was old enough to live separately, gifting me the apartment. Harren and I had moved in together, and we had cherished it ever since. Otis continued, eyeing me carefully. "This apartment is nearly 45 years old, but it's in such a nice neighborhood in the city center." Yes, that's what they wanted the apartment. Nefa returned from the kitchen, towel in hand. "What's this about?" she asked, voice casual but edged with curiosity. "About how we got this apartment," Otis said meaningfully, glancing at his wife. Oh, this apartment, Nefa said, her gaze sweeping critically over the living room. Not bad, but it could use a little renovation. The furniture isn't exactly brand new. I felt a flash of irritation. Harren and I had chosen the furniture ourselves. It wasn't the fanciest, but it was comfortable, well maintained, and reflected decades of life we had built together. We had only updated the walls 5 years ago, and still, it seemed, nothing about our home would ever satisfy them. Like, either way it's organized, I said firmly. Of course you do, Mom, Otis hastened to assure me. It's just that you're not here much. All day long you're at work, and an apartment like this is worth using. Now I could see exactly where they were going with this. They want my apartment, but I decided not to make it easy for them. Well, when I'm here, I enjoy every minute of it. I said, this is my home. Everything here is precious to me. Of course, Mom. Nafila sat down next to me on the cushion and took my hand. The gesture was so fake that it made me want to pull my hand away. We realized how many memories are associated with this place. But Yaupno, sometimes you have to move on. What do you mean? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Well, she looked at Odie's. We were thinking you'll eat work all day. And we have plans for the future. Big plans. What kind of plans? We want to have a baby. Otis blurted out. I froze. Oddies and Nefella had always maintained that children were not for them. Too much responsibility, too little freedom, Nefella had said. And Oddies would chime in as he always did. A child? I asked again. I thought you said people change, Mom. Otis interrupted. We've gotten older, wiser. We've realized that family is the most important thing. Nefilla nodded vigorously, squeezing my hand even tighter. And that's why, continued. We need more space. The children's room. At play area. It all made sense now. They didn't come to visit me. They came for me apartment. I released my hand from Neffle's grip and stood up. I think we should all get some rest, I said in a steady voice. It's getting late. And I have a work day. Tomorrow. But Mom started. Tomorrow I cut him off. Tomorrow we'll discuss your plans for the future. They looked at each other with unconcealed disappointment. Clearly, they had hoped to settle the matter today. Sure, Mom, Oddies Vanilla said. We're staying at a hotel nearby. We'll stop by tomorrow night. Okay. He nodded, walking them to the door. When the door closed behind them, I leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. So, they want my apartment. And for that, they're even willing to pretend they want a baby. Well, tomorrow would be an interesting conversation. Their morning started as usual, the alarm clock at 5:30, a quick breakfast, and getting ready for work. I tried not to think about Oddies and Nefa's visit yesterday, focusing on the day ahead. I had 4 sessions scheduled with different patients today, and I needed to give each one my full attention. But me thoughts kept returning to my son and daughter-in-law's strange behavior. Having a child. After 15 years of categorical statements that children were not for them, something didn't add up, and I had a feeling I'd find out what it was tonight. The workday flew by quickly. When you spend time with kids and horses, there's no opportunity to wallow in personal problems. Every minute requires full concentration. Any distraction can lead to injury, if they're to a child or an animal. By 4 o'clock, I finished the last session and headed home. On the way, I bought groceries for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a vegetable liqueur that I could make quickly. I knew Addis and Nafila were coming over, and I wanted to have energy for the upcoming conversation. At home, the first thing I did was shower, washing the smell of the stable off of me. Then I put on clean house clothes, simple pants, and a sweater. I had no desire to dress up to meet them. It was my house and I would be in it as I was. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw them again, all dressed up, smiles on their faces, and another bouquet. Roses this time. "Hi, Mom." Otis leaned over to kiss my cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied, accepting the bouquet from Nafila. "Come in. I made dinner." "Oh, you shouldn't have bothered," Nefla said with fake concern. "We could have ordered something." "I love to cook." I cut her off. "And that's not a concern." We made our way to the kitchen. I took a casserole out of the oven and started setting the table. Nafila, as usual, tried to take the lead, but I stopped her. "Thank you. I can manage on my own." She backed away with a barely perceptible grimace of displeasure. Oddies opened the bottle of wine they had brought and poured it into glasses. "So," I said as we sat down at the table, "Ya wanted to discuss some plans?" They looked at each other. Otis took a big sip of wine, and Nafila gave a strained smile. "Yes, Mum." Otis began. "You see, Nefa and I have been thinking a lot about the future, about how to make things work out for the best for all of us, minus I, and we decided it was time for us to have our own family nest." Nefela said, "A place where we could raise our children, have visitors, live our lives to the fullest." I nodded silently, waiting for her to continue. So far, it sounded like the usual dreams of a house of my own. Although I knew they had an apartment, a small one, built in a good neighborhood. They'd bought it on credit 3 years ago, and were always complaining about the high payments. "The thing is," Otis continued, "our apartment is too small for a family. Just 1 bedroom, a small living room. If we have your kid, it's going to be too small." "What about your credit?" I asked. "Did you pay it off again with the looks?" "Something they weren't telling me." "Not exactly," Odis admitted. "But we thought, well, we could sell our apartment, pay off the loan, and the rest. Well, it would be a deposit for something bigger." "But nice apartments are so expensive these days," Nefela sighed. "Especially in the center, and we need the center for work, for the child's future school." I was beginning to see where they were going with this, but I decided to let them talk. "And what do you plan to do?" I asked as I put my casserole on. "We were thinking." Odis paused, then blurted out, "We thought you could give us this apartment. Here it is in plain text." I slowly put down my fork and looked at them both. Nafila sat with an expression of tense anticipation and tapped his fingers nervously on the table. "To give you an apartment," I repeated in a steady voice. "Where do you expect me to live?" "Oh, we've thought of everything," Nafila exclaimed enthusiastically. "You could move into our apartment. It's small, but it's just right for 1 person, and it's a nice, quiet neighborhood. So, you're suggesting I move from my 2-bedroom apartment in the center to your 1-bedroom in the suburbs?" "Well, not on outskirts," corrected. "Just not in the center." "And what about your loan? Do I have to take it out?" There was that exchange. Off licks again. "Well, it would great if you could help with the final payments. Said after all, it's 4th family, for your future grandson or granddaughter." I looked at them, and for the first time in a long time I really saw who they had become. My son, once a kind and open boy who dreamed of helping animals, had turned into a calculating Mennonite, ready to use even a non-existent child to get what he wanted. And Nafila, well, she's always been like that. "Are you really planning to have a child?" I asked her straight out. "Of course." Nafila smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "We've already discussed everything. As soon as we've solved the housing problem, we'll start planning for a new addition." "That's strange," I said. A year ago, you said that pregnancy would ruin your figure and career and that children were a burden. People change, she said, blushing slightly. In a year, I raised an eyebrow. And why now, Mom? Otis intervened. It's not just the baby. It's just that this apartment, it's too big for you alone. You're at work all day. You only come to sleep and we could really use it. Make a real home out of it. You don't think this is a real home? I put my hand around the kitchen where every single thing had a story to tell. The table we were sitting at had been bought by my parents. It was where Otis did his homework, where Harren and I celebrated anniversaries, where I sat long. Evenings after he died, reminiscing about our lives. That's not what I meant, Otis muttered. It's just that you didn't need that much space on your own. Do you? I asked. For a child, that doesn't exist. It will exist, Nafila said indignantly, just not right away. I shook my head and stood up from the table. I think we need a break in this conversation. I'm going to go make some tea. I went into the kitchen and turned on the kettle, trying to gather my thoughts. I could hear them whispering through the open door. Shouldn't agree, Nafila hissed. I told you I should have approached it differently. Give her time, replied. She just didn't expect such an offer. We can't wait any longer. Yauk know our situation. I know, but it's no use pushing her. She's stubborn. Their whispering was interrupted when I returned with the kettle and cups. I pretended I hadn't heard and quietly poured the tea. So, I said, sitting back down at the table, let's get this straight. You want me to give you the apartment I've lived in for almost 45 years and move into your small apartment with an unpaid loan? And all this for a child that I don't have yet, and don't know if I'll ever have. Am I reading this right? When you put it that way, it sounds selfish of us, said, obviously trying to soften the situation. But we're really thinking about the future. A family. What family? I asked. In the last 7 months, you've never once called or stopped by. And now all of a sudden, you're thinking about family values. We've had some tough times, sighed. A lot of work, a lot of worries. What kind of worries? I looked him straight in the eye. What's really going on with you guys? He looked away, but Nafila intervened. We just want what's best for all of us and for you too, Adeline. At your age, you shouldn't have to live in such a big space. It's a lot of work, a lot of cleaning. I can handle it. I cut him off. And I'm not going anywhere. But Mum, Otis exclaimed, think about us. We need a chance to start a normal family life. What's stopping you from starting one in your apartment? I asked. Or buy a new one if this one is too small. You know how real estate prices are these days. Nafila said irritably. We can't afford anything decent. What happened to your savings? I asked. Oddies, you said you had investment stocks. He blushed and looked away. There was a slight market crash. We lost some of our investment. Part of it or all of it. Not all of it. Nafila answered quickly. We just need time to recover. I was beginning to get the picture. They're in financial trouble, worse than they admit, and they're looking for an easy way out to get my apartment for free. How long have AO been having these problems? I asked. What kind of problems? Otis tried to feign incomprehension, but his fingers began tapping nervously on the table again. Financial, I clarified. Don't think I don't know what's going on. You're up to your eyeballs in debt and you need a way out. That's not exactly true, I started. But Nafa interrupted him. Who cares if we're in trouble or not? You're not really using this apartment anyway. You're hardly ever here. You spend all your time with your horses. If you love them so much, why didn't you move out of town closer to them and leave us the apartment? Her voice was harder, no longer. Feigned concern. I saw the real Nefer, calculating, demanding, thinking the world owed her something. "I'm not going anywhere," I repeated calmly. "This is my home and I'm staying here." "But, Mum," Otis changed his tactics, a pleading tone in his voice. "You've always said that family is the most important thing, that you do anything for us." "For family?" Yes, I agreed. But family isn't just about getting. It's also about giving. When was the last time you took an interest in my life, my problems, my joys? "Well, we're busy," he muttered. "We all have our own lives." "Exactly," I nodded. "Everyone has a life, and my life is here in this apartment." Nefer sighed irritably. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn. It's just walls. There, just square meters. And we're your family, your blood." "They're not just walls," I argued. "It's 45 years of memories. This is where I was born and raised. This is where Harlan died. Every corner here reminds me of our lives. But you can take pictures, personal things." Nafila insisted. "The memories are in your head, not in the walls." I looked at her and realized we were speaking different languages. For her, a house is just a place, just property that can be sold, traded, used to elevate one's status. For me, it's a part of who I am. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not giving you the apartment. Not now, not later." "But Mum." Audie's looked really confused. "What are we going to do?" "We were counting on your help. If you want help, just tell me straight up what's wrong," I replied. "No baby stories, no manipulation. Just the truth." They looked at each other again. Nefela pressed her lips together, and Otis ran his hand through his hair, a gesture headed in moments of stress. "All right," he finally said. "We do have a problem. We owe the bank money. A lot of money." "For what?" "All sorts of things." Nafila intervened. "An apartment loan, a car loan, a few other loans for life." "What kind of life?" I wasn't going to back down. "Your travels, designer clothes, restaurants, that's none of your business." She flared up. "We live our lives as we see fit. And now you want me to pay for your lifestyle?" "Yeah, we're just asking for help," said conciliatory. "Like any family, a family helps each other in times of need." I agreed, but not at the expense of putting a roof over one of its members' heads. "Who's depriving you?" Nafila was indignant. "We're offering you our apartment with debts you can't pay off." "Well, you could help with that," Audie said quietly. "You've got some savings. Is that what you want?" I felt anger rising inside. "Not just my apartment, but my money." "Not like that," Otis exclaimed. "We just think we could help each other out, you to us, with a place to live and maybe a little financially. And we'll give you care and attention." "Care and attention?" I said again, "which you only get when you want something from me." "That's not fair," he said. "We're just all busy doing our own thing." "Exactly." I nodded. "You're busy doing your thing. I'm busy doing mine, and my apartment is my business. I'm not going to give it away." Nefela jumped up from the table. "I don't understand how you can be so selfish," she shouted. "We're offering you a reasonable solution and you're just being stubborn on principle." Nefela said warningly, but she didn't listen. "No, let her know," she continued. "We've already planned everything. I know what furniture to buy, what wallpaper to paste, how to change this dull apartment into something modern and stylish. You've already planned everything," I repeated slowly. "Even before you asked me consent. Why would I ask?" She didn't hide her irritation. "You don't really live here anyway. You only come here to sleep. We could make a real home here." I stood up, feeling my hands shaking, not from fear, but from anger. "I think it's time for you to leave." I said quietly, but firmly. Mom, that's not what Nefella meant, Oddies began. But I held up my hand to stop him. No, that's exactly what she meant. And now I see what you really think of me and my life. That it's not real. That my home is just a space that I don't deserve because I didn't spend enough time here. That's not what we meant to say, Otis muttered. Stop lying. I cut him off. Stop pretending. You need my apartment to solve your financial problems. Everything else is manipulation. What manipulation? Nefela acted like an insulted innocent. You really want Abby? Since when? I asked. Since you realized you could use that as an argument. She blushed but didn't say anything. Otis stared at the floor, hesitating to meet my gaze. Go away, I repeated. I'm not giving you the apartment. Not now. Not ever. But Mum finally looked up. What are we going to do? We're desperate. Sell the car, I suggested. Move to a smaller apartment. Get a second job. Do what all people do when they have financial problems. Solve them yourself, not at the expense of others. You don't understand, Nefela exclaimed. We can't live like this. We're used to a certain level of comfort. Then get used to the idea of giving it up, I said. Because I'm not going to pay for your comfort with my home. I saw anger appear in Nefela's eyes. The real anger of someone who wasn't used to rejection and wasn't going to take it. You're gonna regret this, she hissed. We're the only family you have, and you're choosing walls over us. I'm choosing me, I replied calmly. For the first time in a long time, I'm choosing what I need over you. Otis sighed and stood up. Let's go, Nefela. We're not going to decide anything today. No, we're not leaving until she agrees. Nefela crossed her arms across her chest. This is too important for us. I will never say yes, I said. And the longer you insist, the more I'm convinced I'm doing the right thing. Neela opened her mouth to say something, but took her hand. Let's go, he repeated. We need to think this over. She reluctantly allowed herself to be led toward the door. On the threshold, Otis turned around. We'll talk about it, Mom. It's too important to just back out like this. I didn't answer, just closed the door behind them, and turned the key in the lock. Then I leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. Now I knew exactly what they wanted, and I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. But I wasn't going to give up either. This apartment was my home, my last stronghold, and no one was going to make me give it up. I went back into their kitchen and started clearing the table. My hands shook as I put the cups in the sink. Not from fear, from realization that all this time, I'd fooled myself into thinking that Oddies and I still had some kind of connection, that he was still my son, and not just a man who wanted to use me. Now I saw the truth, and that truth was bitter but liberating. I hardly slept that night. After Addis and the filler left, I was in a strange state, a mixture of desolation and clarity. It was as if the veil had fallen from my eyes and I finally saw what our relationship had become, or maybe what it'd always been, and I just didn't want to admit it. As I got ready for work this morning, I made a decision. It was time to face the truth and act accordingly. Before leaving, I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser, where I kept important documents, and pulled out a blue folder. Inside were the results of my little investigation I'd started months ago when I'd first suspected that and Nefa were in serious financial trouble. I wasn't a naive old lady who didn't understand anything about modern life, as they apparently believed. I knew how to use the internet. I knew how to gather information. And over the years of working with different families, I had learned to see the signs of problems that people were trying to hide. In the folder were printouts of ads for the sale of their car, which they had posted online 2 months ago, but then deleted. Copies of lawsuits from creditors that I found in a public database. Information that their apartment is mortgaged not only to a bank but also to some private lending organization with a dubious reputation. Also notes about their constant vacations, expensive purchases, restaurants they couldn't afford but kept going to. I put the folder in my bag and headed to work. All day I was distracted, which for my profession is unacceptable. But I couldn't stop thinking about what was to come in the evening. I knew they'd be back. The stakes were too high for them to back down so easily. And indeed, around 7 in the evening, when I had just had time to shower and change after work, the doorbell rang this time. No warning, no bell. Just came, sure that I had to receive them. I opened the door. They stood on the threshold, already without bouquets or smiles. Nafila looked annoyed. Otis looked tense. "May I come in?" he asked in lieu of a greeting. I stepped back silently, letting them into the apartment. We walked into the living room and sat down. They on the couch, me in the chair across from them. The folder was on the coffee table between us, but I wasn't paying attention to it. "We've been thinking about what we talked about yesterday," Otis began. "And we decided that you misunderstood us." Nafila picked up on that. "We're not trying to take anything away from you. We're offering a mutually beneficial solution." "What's that?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Neela and I have talked it over, and we've come to the conclusion that you could move in with us for a while." I said, trying to sound reasonable. "To live in our apartment to see if you like it. In there. Meantime, we'd live here, and if all went well, we could make an exchange with an extra payment from you." "Of course," Nefa added. "Our apartment is smaller, so that would be fair." I stared at them and couldn't believe their insolence. Did they really think I would agree to such an obvious scam? "What about your debts?" I asked bluntly. "Are you going to give them to me too, along with the apartment?" They looked at each other. Otis looked embarrassed and Nefa looked annoyed. "We'd work it out," he said uncertainly. "Maybe you could help with the last installments." "You mean you want me to not only give you my apartment, but also pay for yours?" I shook my head. "That's absurd." "Not at all," Nefela exclaimed. "It's family cooperation. You've always said that a family should support each other." "Supportive, yes," he agreed. "But not at the expense of depriving one member of the family of a roof over his head. No one's depriving you." Nafila's voice became hysterical. "You're getting your apartment with the debts I have to pay from my pension." "No thanks, Mom," Adi stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You have to help us. We're in a desperate situation." "I don't owe you anything," I replied firmly. "Everything I owed you as a son, I fulfilled long ago. I raised you, educated you, supported you all these years. You're an adult now, and you're responsible for your own decisions." Nafila jumped up from the couch, her face contorted with anger. "I can't believe you're so selfish," she shouted. "We ask for help and you refuse. What kind of mother are you, Nafila?" I said warningly, but she didn't listen. "No, let her know," she continued, stepping on me. "You have to help us. You owe it to your family." I looked at her angry face and felt strangely calm. All these years I'd been dreading this moment. The moment when the masks would be torn away, when the truth would be revealed. But now that it had happened, I was relieved. "I don't owe anyone anything," I said quietly, but firmly. "Certainly not you too." Mum stood beside his wife, his voice pleading. "Understand, it's just walls. It's just an apartment, and we're your family, your blood." I looked at the two of them, so different and yet so similar in their belief that the world should fit them, that they had the right to demand and receive without giving anything in return. "This apartment isn't just walls," I said, rising from my chair. "It's my home, my life, my sanctuary, and you." I paused, looking them straight in the eye. You're just temporary guests. They froze as Ifide slapped them. Nafila turned pale and Ois opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. What do you mean? Nafila finally squeezed out. What I said, I replied calmly. You're a temporary presence in my life. You come when you want something and you disappear when you get it. Or not getting it like this time. But I am your son. Audis exclaimed, resentment and distrust in his voice. Yes, you are my son, I agreed. But that doesn't give you the right to control my life or my property. No one's trying to do that, Neffel intervened. We're just asking for help. No, you're demanding, I corrected. And threatening and manipulative. This isn't asking for help. It's an attempt to use him. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the blue folder. They watched my movements with growing concern. What's this? Audis asked. I opened the folder and pulled out the first sheet. A print out of an ad for the sale of their car. You tried to sell your SUV 2 months ago, I said. Why? They looked at each other. A look of surprise and fear on their faces. Where did you started? But I didn't let him finish. Then you changed your mind. Decided to maintain a semblance of prosperity. It pulled out the next document. And this is a copy of a lawsuit from a credit organization called Quick Loan. They want you to repay a loan of $40,000 plus interest. A loan you took out against an apartment that was already mortgaged. How is that even possible? You've been following. US? Nefela looked shocked. No, I shook my head. I just know how to use the internet and open databases. Yawen exactly hiding. I continued to pull out the documents one by one, listing their debts, their reckless spending, their financial ventures. With each new sheet, they grew paler and paler. This one is interesting, I said, showing a print out of a social media page. Your vacation in Bali a month ago. Judging by the photos, you lived in a 5-star hotel, ate inexpensive étancles, rented a yacht. All this while, you were already up to your eyeballs in debt. How do you explain that? It's none of your business. Nefela flared up. We have the right to live the way we want. Of course I agreed. But not at my expense, Mom. Otis looked confused. And scared. How did you know all this? It's not that hard, I answered. I've suspected for a long time that you were in trouble. There were too many signs. You were always bragging about your shopping and traveling. Yet, you were always asking me. For money, it didn't add up. I gathered the documents back into the folder and put it on the table. So, here's what I see. I continued. You're living beyond your means, taking out loans to support Alafestar you can't afford. And now that the debts have gotten too high, you've attested that I should pay for your mistakes. That's not what we meant, Eyes muttered. That's exactly what I meant, I countered. You want me to give you my apartment and take over your debts, and in return for what? You're a society that only shows up when you need something. Nafila crossed her arms over her chest, her face contorted with anger. And now what? She asked. Are you going to blackmail us with this information? I shook my head. Nomba, I'm offering you a choice. What choice? Ois looked confused. I sat back in my chair and looked at them. So young and yet so confused by their own lies. Option 1. You leave now, and never come back demanding my apartment. You solve your problems on your own like adults. And the second, Nafila asked with a challenge. The second you tell me honestly about your financial situation, all your debts, all your loans, all your obligations. You show me all your documents. Give me access to your accounts and I help you develop a plan to get out of this crisis. Unifella didn't hide her skepticism. How are you going to help us? I wasn't always a hypnotherapist, I replied. Before that, I worked as a financial consultant in a bank, and I have friends in that field who can give good advice. It was true. Before I found my calling in working with horses and people, I worked in a bank for 10 years. Although that was a long time ago, the basic principles of financial planning haven't changed. And you are going to give us money? Nefer asked bluntly. No, I shook my head. I won't give you a dime until I'm sure you've changed your attitude toward money. But I can help with negotiating with creditors, with debt restructuring, with budget planning. Eyes looked thoughtful, but Nafila snorted. So, you won't give us money or an apartment, but you want to control our lives? No, thank you. I'm not going to control you, I objected. I'm offering help. Real help, not a quick fix that will only make the problem worse. What problem? Nafila was still struggling. We don't have a problem, just temporary difficulties. Nafila Audi said softly, I think Wes will at least listen to Mom's suggestion. What? She turned to him in disbelief. Are you serious? You want her to meddle in our affairs? I want us to stop dreading every call, thinking it's debt collectors. He answered quietly. He went to sleep at night, not think about where to get money for the next payment. I looked at my son in surprise. For the first time in a long time, there was sincerity in his voice. Maybe all is not lost yet. This is humiliating, Nephil exclaimed. To have to answer to her for every purchase, every decision. It's more humiliating to lose your apartment and end up on the street, I said. Or do you think it won't happen? We'll figure something out, she said stubbornly. There's always a way. Yes, there's always a way out, I agreed. But it's not always the one you like. I sat down on the couch and covered his face with his hands. He looked exhausted, as if he'd finally shed the mask he'd been wearing all this time. Nefer, we need help, he said quietly. We're failing. We are, she objected. We just need a little time. And if your mother weren't so selfish enough, interrupted her. Just enough. We've brought ourselves to this point. Mom's right. Nafila looked at him as if he'd braid her. Then she looked at me with a look of hatred. You set this up, she hissed. You planned this whole thing to make us fight. I didn't plan anything, I said calmly. You came to me with your demands. I just showed you the truth. What truth? She almost shouted. The truth that you can't live in debt all the time. That sooner or later you have to pay the bills. That you can't build a life on lies and manipulation. Nafila grabbed her bag and headed for the door. I'm not going to listen to this. She threw over her shoulder. Do what you want, Ois, but I'm not a part of this. She stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door loudly. Otis and I were left alone. He was still sitting with his hands over his face. She calmed down, he said finally. She just needs time. Maybe, I answered, though I doubted it. But the question is, what are you going to do about it? He looked up at me, tired, flushed. I don't know, Mom, I'm confused. We spent so many years living like this, pretending that everything was fine, that we were successful, happy, and the truth is we were always afraid the truth would come out. How long have you been in trouble? I asked more gently. Almost from the beginning, he admitted. Nafila, she always wanted more. Better apartment, better car, better clothes. I tried to match it, took out loans, worked overtime, but it was never enough. There was always something else to buy, some place to visit. I listened to him and thought about how little I really knew about my son's life all these years, how hid his problems from me. And I pretended to believe he was successful. And now what? I asked, are you willing to accept my help on my terms? He was silent for a long time, staring at Thefla. Then he looked up and nodded. Yes, Mum, I'm ready. I'm tired of living like this. Good. I got up from the chair and walked over to the table where the folder was lying. Then here's what we'll do. You're going to bring me all the paperwork on your loans and debts. Every single one of them. We'll sit down and draw up a complete picture of your financial situation, and then we'll come up with a plan. And Nefa hissed uncertainly. It's her choice, I replied. I can't force her to participate, but if she wants your marriage to survive, she have to agree to the changes. I sighed and stood up. I'll talk to her. I'll try to explain. Good. I nodded. One more thing, no more talk about my apartment. It's my place, my home, and I'm not going to give up ever. Is that clear? Yes, Mom. He looked ashamed. We're sorry about that. I shouldn't have even brought it up. You're right. Yao shouldn't have, I agreed. But what's done is done. Now we have to move on. Otis nodded and headed for the door. On the threshold, he turned around. Thanks, Mom, for not kicking Yous out right away. For offering to help. I'll always help you, Otis, I said. But real help, not help you make mistakes. He smiled weakly and walked out. I closed the door behind him and leaned back against it, feeling a strange mixture of tiredness and relief. I didn't know if Nafila would accept my terms. I didn't know if would have the resolve to change his life. I didn't know if their marriage and their financial situation could still be saved. But I knew one thing. I would no longer let them manipulate me. I would help, but on my own terms, and my apartment would stay mine, no matter what happened. I walked to the kitchen and put the kettle on. There was a long road ahead of me, and I needed the strength to get through it. The morning after our conversation, I woke up with a feeling that something had changed. Not in the world around me, but in myself. It was as if I had finally shed the heavy weight I had been carrying for years, without realizing it. A burden of guilt imposed on me by my own son and his wife. I was expecting a call from Otis. I thought he'd come with the papers like we agreed, but the phone wasn't all day. I couldn't stand it any longer and dialed his number myself in the evening. No one answered. The same thing happened the next day and the next. On the fourth day after our confrontation, I got a message. Short, angry, full of accusations. You've ruined our family. Nafila has filed for divorce. She says she can't be with a man who lets his mother interfere in their lives. I hope you're happy. I reread the message several times, trying to understand. What had happened? Neela had filed for divorce because of me offer to help. It seemed odd, illogical. But then again, I didn't know my sister-in-law well. Maybe controlling was more important to her than financial stability. I didn't respond to the message. What could I say? That I was sorry. That I wasn't sorry for finally speaking the truth. For protecting my home. For offering real help instead of just giving them everything I had. A couple days later, I got another text. Nefela moved in with a friend. Says she won't come back until I choose between her and you. Thanks for putting me in this position. Again, the accusation sagging, trying to make me feel guilty. I deleted the message without responding. And then the calls started. Not from OIS, from mutual acquaintances, family, friends, even my co-workers. They all started the conversation the same way. Adeline, I heard you and Ois are having some kind of problem. The first caller was Myrtle, my colleague from the clinic with whom we had worked together for almost 15 years. Adeline, darling, what's going on with you? She asked after the usual greetings. Otis called me yesterday. He's so upset. What did he say? I asked, already guessing things were. Well, he said you two had a fight. That you refused to help him in his time of need. That Nafila wanted to divorce him because of it. He sounded so depressed. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Myrtle, this is a family matter, and I don't want to drag outsiders into it. Not even you. But believe me, It's not the way Audie's describes it. But he's your son. She sounded perplexed. Shouldn't you be helping him? I offered to help, I replied. But enough kind they wanted. Myrtle was silent for a moment, then said carefully. He mentioned something about an apartment. That you didn't want to give them your apartment, even though you hardly need it. That was it. Audie's wasn't just complaining. He was spreading his version of events, making me look like a callous, selfish mother. Myrtle, I said firmly, I'm not going to discuss my place or my relationship with my son with you. But I'll tell you one thing, no one has the right to demand that I give up my house. No one. After that, the conversation ended quickly. Myrtle was embarrassed by my abruptness, but I couldn't let this gossip spread without resistance. Gina, the wife of Harlan's former co-worker, called next. They'd always been closer to Audie's than to me, and I wasn't surprised to hear her name on the phone screen. Adeline, she began without preamble. What's going on between you and Audie's? He says you refused to help him, even though you know he and Nafila are having financial problems. Gina. I replied calmly. I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter. I'd rather not discuss it with outsiders. But we're not outsiders, she objected. We've known since he was a child, and I find it strange that you refuse to help him when you have the opportunity to help him. Did he tell you exactly what kind of help he wanted? I asked him. Well, something about an apartment that you could trade with them since you lived alone in such a big apartment. I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. Gina, I won't discuss it, but before you judge me, think about this. Does anyone have the right to demand that an elderly person give up their house and take on other people's debts? She was silent, clearly not expecting such a question. Debts? What debts? Otis didn't say anything about debts. Exactly. I said he doesn't say much and I am not going to tell his secrets. So let's just drop the subject. The cows continued after that, but I stopped answering them. It was clear to me that was calling everyone he knew, making me look bad, trying to pressure me through other people to make me feel guilty. But there was no guilt. There was only fatigue and frustration and a stranger sense of freedom. It was as if I had finally shed the mask I had worn for years, trying to live up to the image of perfect mother, always willing to sacrifice herself for her son. A week after our confrontation, I received another text from Audie's. Are you happy? Nafila took all her stuff and moved out. Says she wants nothing to do with a family where the mother controls the adult son, and I'm left alone with debts I can't pay. If I get evicted, it will be in your conscience. I didn't respond to that message either, but it got me thinking, had Neela really left oispeckles of me, or was it just a convenient excuse, a way to avoid responsibility for their financial problems? Maybe she'd been looking for a reason to leave for a long time, and it just turned out to be a suitable scapegoat. I didn't know the answers to those questions, but one thing I did know was that I wasn't to blame for their problems. They had created this situation themselves with their decisions, their lifestyle, their lies and manipulations. That evening, I sat in the kitchen looking through old photo albums. Snapshots of Ois as a child, a teenager, a young man, his graduation from high school, his first job, his wedding to Nafila. In all the pictures, he was smiling, looking happy. But was that smile genuine? Or was he already wearing a mask, hiding his true feelings and thoughts? I remembered how things had changed after his meeting with Nefa. How had gradually drifted away from Harren and me. How his interests, his values, his attitude toward life had changed. How he'd gone from a dreamy young Mamwo wanted to work with animals to a man obsessed with status and external sex. But was it only Nefa's fault? Or was I also responsible for what he had become? Maybe I had overprotected him as a child, or conversely not guiding him enough when he started to lose his way. I tried to remember when our problems began, when socializing with my son went from a joy to a chore. When I began to feel tense at every request hammered, every visit he made. Maybe it started after Harlan died. My husband had always been a buffer between me and my son. He was better at seeing Odyssey's manipulations, better at resisting them. I was always giving in, always making excuses for his behavior. He's just going through a rough patch, I told myself when borrowed money from Usand didn't pay us back. They're going through a tough time. I reassured Harun Addis. And Nafila cancelled meetings at the last minute, or only showed up when they needed something. He's still learning to be an adult. I excused my son when he shifted responsibility for his mistakes onto others. The Oddies is 42 years old now. He is long past the age of a child learning to be an adult. He's an adult who refuses to take responsibility for his life. And for years I've indulged that, let him use me, manipulate me out of fear of losing him, out of guilt for some real or perceived mistakes I made in raising him, out of a desire to be a good mom, even if it means sacrificing my interests, my comfort, my well-being. I closed the album and put it away in the closet. You can't change the past, but you can't change the present and the future. And I was finally ready to do that. The next day came another message from OIS. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the apartment. I have 2 weeks left to find the money. Are you really going to let your son end up on the street? I almost gave in. I almost answered. Almost offered to help. Not the help he wanted, but at least some. Then I remembered all previous times I'd given in, how it had only made things worse, made Heimven more dependent, even less responsible. No, I'm not giving in this time. He's a grown man. He has to work out his own problems. I deleted the message without a reply. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw one Sharvan with red eyes and wrinkled clothes. Mom, he said without saying hello. I need your help. It's urgent. I stared at him in silence, not inviting him in. The bank is giving me one last chance, he continued. If I pay at least half of what I owe, they'll agree to restructure the rest. I need $20,000. Ikno, you have savings. Where's Nafila? I asked. Did she really leave you? He looked away. Yes. She said she couldn't live with a loser who couldn't give her a decent life. That sounded more plausible than his original version that she left because of my interference. And you think that if you solved the financial problems, she'd come back? He shrugged. I don't. Maybe she would, but that's not the point. I need to keep the apartment. I need somewhere to live. Have you tried other options? I asked. Talk to your employer about an advance, sell the car, go to other banks to refinance. I tried everything, he exclaimed in frustration. No one will give a loan to a person with my credit history. I'm already trying to sell the car, but it will take time, and time is exactly what I don't have. I looked at my son and saw him as a little boy who had shattered his knee and came running to his mom for comfort. But he wasn't that little boy anymore. He was a grown man who had made the same mistakes over and over again, expecting someone else to fix them. I'm not giving you money, Ois, I said quietly. Not this time. But Mom, he looked genuinely shocked. You've always helped me. Always. And know that I'm in a really desperate situation. You refused. It's because I've always helped that we're in this situation, I replied. Illit you depend on me, instead of teaching you to stand on your own 2 feet. My mistake, and I'm not going to make it again. Are you? You're leaving? There was resentment in his voice mixed with disbelief. No. I shook my head. I'm not abandoning you. I'm just stopping to save you from the consequences of your own decisions. But I'm going to lose the apartment, he exclaimed. I'll have nowhere to go. There are lots of options, I said. You could get a room or a small apartment or move to another city where housing is cheaper. You could find a roommate to share expenses. There are plenty of solutions that don't involve using your mother. I'm not using you. He resented. I'm just asking for help. No. Orders. I objected. You're not asking. You demand. You expect. You think you're entitled to me money, my property, my life. That's not asking for help. It's a use. He opened his mouth to object, but then closed it, unable to find the words. There was a whole range of emotions on his face. Anger, fear, resentment, frustration. You're going to regret this, he said quietly at last. When I man the street, when my life is ruined, you'll regret not helping me when you could have. Maybe, I agreed, but I think I'll regret it even more if I keep letting you use me instead of teaching you how to cope on your own. He looked at me with a fury I'd never seen in his eyes before. You're not a mother, he gritted through his teeth. A real mother would never do that. The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't show any pain. A real mother does what's best for her child in the long run, I said calmly. Even if the child doesn't realize it, even if it hurts them both. Go to hell. He spat out and turned to walk away. I watched him walk down the stairs, feeling a strange mixture of pain and relief. Pain from his words, from his anger, from the realization that our relationship might never be the same, and relief that I'd finally stopped pretending, stopped playing a role that was slowly killing me from the inside out. I closed the door and walked into the kitchen. I made some tea and sat by the window looking out at the city which was sinking into the evening twilight. I thought about my life, my decisions, my mistakes. I loved my son. Always had, and always would. But love doesn't have to mean self-destruction. Love shouldn't be a one-way street where one always gives and the other always takes. Maybe I realized that too late. Maybe I let him use me, manipulate me for too long. Maybe I missed the moment when I could still fix things, teach him responsibility, autonomy, respect for others. But even so, better late than ever. Better to stop now than to continue down a path that only leads to more destruction. I didn't know what would happen next, whether Otis would come back with new demands or disappear from my life, whether he would find a way to solve his problems or let them destroy himself, whether he would ever forgive me for refusing to be his lifeline. But I knew one thing. I would no longer live in fear. I would not let guilt drive my decisions. I would not sacrifice myself for a man who didn't appreciate those sacrifices. I would live my life, continue to do the work I love, take care of myself and my home. And if ever decides to come back, not with demands but with a sincere desiree, rebuild a relationship on a healthy basis, I'll be ready to listen to him. In the meantime, for now, I'll just live day by day, one step at a time. Learning to be not only a mother but also myself. Learning to set boundaries, learning to say no. Learning how to love without completely dissolving into that love. It won't be easy. Years of habits, years of giving in, years of self-denial will not disappear overnight. There would be moments of doubt, moments of weakness, moments when I would be ready to give up and go back to old patterns of behavior. But I knew now that I could fight back. I could stand my ground. I could defend myself and my boundaries, and in that knowledge was a strength I had lacked for so long. It had been a week since Odyssey's last visit. I hadn't received any calls or messages from him. Only occasional calls from mutual friends who were still trying to find out what had happened between us. I learned to answer briefly and politely without going into details. This is all family business, and I prefer not to discuss it. Saturday morning, I called Alex Smith I knew and arranged to have the locks changed. He arrived a couple hours later, an older man with kind eyes and skillful hands. He worked quickly and accurately, without asking unnecessary questions. Only when he was stoned did he ask problems with your ex-husband. With my son? I answered briefly. He nodded understandingly, showing neither surprise nor judgment. It happens, he said simply. My daughter changed the locks because of me 10 years ago. I was drinking heavily then, going after her for money. Best she could do. And how are things now? I asked, suddenly interested in his story. It's fine now, he smiled. I haven't had a drink in 8 years. She forgave me. But it was me who had to change, not her. His words stayed with me after he left. I was the one who had to change, not her. That's right. Otis had to change, not me. And until he realized that, our relationship would remain broken. I put the new keys in my bag and headed to my lawyer's office. Mark Stanley, a short, energetic man in his 50s, was a friend of Harlan's. He had helped me with the probate after my husband's death and had handled all my legal matters ever since. Adeline, he exclaimed as I entered his office. What? A pleasant surprise. What can I do for you? I want to change my will, I said without preamble. He raised his eyebrows but quickly returned his face to a professional expression. Sure. What changes do you want to make? I want to exclude my son from inheritance, I said firmly. Now, he couldn't hide his surprise. Oddies, but why? Unless it's Askrat, of course, I sighed. I didn't want to tell the whole story, but some explanation was necessary. We had a disagreement, I said. A serious disagreement that led to a breakup, and I don't want him to get what he demanded when I was alive. Mark tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. Adeline, I won't ask for details. That's our own business. But as your attorney and Harlan's friend, I need to make sure you make this decision thoughtfully. Ending a relationship with your children is a big step. You understand? I nodded. And believe me, I wouldn't have made this decision unless I was absolutely sure it was necessary. He looked at me carefully, then nodded. All right. Who do you want to appoint as heir instead of Oddies? I wondered. I had no other children or close relatives, nor did I have any close friends to whom I wanted to leave my apartment and savings. I want my property to be sold and the proceeds used to set up a small stable for hippotherapy sessions. I finalized something like a private practice that could be handed over to one of my young colleagues. Mark smiled. That's a good idea. A continuation of your business even after you're gone. Harlan will be pleased. We spent the next hour discussing the details of the new will. Who would manage the sale of the estate? Who would be responsible for setting up the stable? What conditions must be met in selecting a successor? Mark wrote everything down with professional thoroughness, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When we finished, he looked at me with a slight sadness. You know, Adeline, I hope this is a temporary solution, that you and Ois will reconcile, and you won't have to cut him out of the will. I hope so too, I said honestly. But I'm not going to wait and hope forever. Life is too short for it. He nodded, understanding. I'll have the papers ready by Wednesday. Will you be able to come over to sign them? Sure, I said, standing up. Thank you, Mark. Always happy to help. He walked me to the door. And Adeline, whatever happens between you and Oddies, remember that you are not alone. You have friends who will support you. I smiled gratefully at him and walked out of the office, feeling strangely relieved. It was as if by changing my will I had put an end to some long convoluted story, a story in which I had played a role imposed on me by others for far too long. The next 2 weeks passed in remarkable calm. I worked, came home, read books, watched movies, took the occasional walk around town. No calls from no uninvited visits. Even mutual acquaintance stopped calling to ask questions. Apparently, they realized I wasn't going to discuss my family problems with them. I almost believed that the story was over, that I had made my decision, and would no longer try to manipulate me. But deep down, I knew it was too easy. Too easy. People don't change that quickly, especially when it comes to deeply ingrained patterns of behavior. And I was right. Friday night, when I got home from work and had just had time to shower, the doorbell rang. I went to the peephole and saw Audie's. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him. A clean-shaven, neatly dressed man without that haggarded expression in his eyes. I opened the door but stood in the doorway, not inviting him in. "Hi, Mom," he said with an uncertain smile. "Can I come in? We need to talk." I paused, gauging his mood, his intentions. Then I nodded and stepped back, letting him into the apartment. Went into the living room and sat down. I in the armchair, he on the couch. We were silent for a while, studying each other. He looked tense but determined. "I get a job," he said at last. "A second job in the evening, a barista at a cafe near me house." "That's good," I replied. "Neutrally handled the car," he continued. "Not for as much as I wanted, but it was enough to negotiate with the bank to restructure my debt." "I'm happy for you," I said. And it was true. I was really glad that he was starting to take some steps to solve his problems. But it's not enough. He stepped forward, looking me in the eye. "I still need your help, Mom. Not money, not an apartment, just support." I could feel the tension. What did he mean by support? Wasn't this just another manipulation? What kind of support? I asked it cautiously. "Nafila's not coming back," he said. And there was bitterness in his voice. "She's filed for divorce. She says she's found someone more promising." "I'm sorry," I said. And it was partly true. I never loved Nefil, but I knew that the breakup was hurting. "No, you're not." He smiled weakly. "You never loved her. And you were right. She was only with me because of the lifestyle I could provide for her. And when I couldn't anymore, she left. I didn't say anything. There was no point in agreeing or arguing. Anyway," he continued, "I have to start all over again. A new job, a new budget, a new life. And I'd feel better if you were there for me. Not financially, just morally." I looked at him carefully, trying to see if he was sincere. Had he really changed, or was this just a new tactic? "Oddies," I finally said, "I'm always willing to support you in healthy endeavors, but I need to be sure this isn't another attempt at manipulation." He sighed and leaned back on the couch. "I understand your doubts, Mom. I really do. I haven't been a good son, especially after Dad died. I used you, took you, gave you nothing in return." His confession surprised me. I didn't expect such honesty. "What made you change your mind?" I asked. He thought for a moment, then said quietly, "You know, when I was selling me car, the buyer asked me why I was doing it. And I started telling him mystery about the loans, about Nefil, about how it all went wrong. And in the middle of the story, I suddenly heard myself from the outside. I heard how many times I'd said, I was unlucky. It was just the way things were. It wasn't my fault. And not once did I admit my own responsibility." He was silent for a moment, then continued. "And then this man, a complete stranger, said to me, 'Buddy, it sounds like it's everybody's fault but yours.' And something clicked in my head. I suddenly realized that he was right. That all my problems were the result of my own decisions, my weakness. My unwillingness to take responsibility for my life. I listened to him without interrupting, afraid to spoil this moment of honesty. And I remembered our last conversation," he continued. "How you said you wouldn't save me from the consequences of my decisions. And I realized that you were right. That all this time you'd been trying to teach me responsibility. And all I'd been doing was blaming you for my lack of love." He looked up at me and he saw genuine remorse in his eyes. I came to apologize, Mom, for everything, for the way I've treated you all these years, for trying to get you to give me the apartment, for spreading gossip about you around, for being such a terrible son. I didn't know what to say. His words sounded sincere, but I'd let myself be deceived for too long to trust blindly. Now, I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, he added, seeing me confusion. I know I broke your trust. I know it will take time to build it, if that's even possible. It is possible, I said quietly. Beautifully, on one condition. What's that? He stepped forward, looking at me expectantly. Our relationship must be one of equals, I said firmly. No manipulation, no expecting me to sacrifice myself for you. No trying to make me feel guilty for taking care of myself. He nodded slowly. That's fair, he said. More than fair. And one more thing, I added. No talk about my apartment. Not ever. It's my house and it will be mine for the rest of my life. And when I die, it will be sold and the money will be used to build a hypnotherapy stable. His eyes widened. You changed the will? Yes, I answered simply. Last week. He looked shocked but quickly pulled himself together. I understand, he said after a pause. And I didn't blame you. I don't deserve to be your heir. Not after everything I've done. We sat in silence, each of us immersed in our own thoughts. I didn't know whether to believe his remorse, his promises. I didn't know if he'd really changed or if this was just a temporary phase after which everything would go back to normal. What are you going to do next? I finally asked. Work, he answered simply. Pay off my debts, learn to live within my means, maybe eventually go back to veterinary medicine. I've always wanted to work with animals like you. Why didn't you do it sooner? I asked with genuine interest. He shrugged his shoulders. Nafella thought it wasn't prestigious, that I was worthy of more than just fiddling with animals. And I wanted to impress her. I wanted to be what she saw in me. Successful, ambitious, aspiring. What do you see in yourself? I asked him. He thought about it, and his face had an expression on it that I hadn't seen in years. Open, honest, unmasked. I don't know, he admitted. I guess I'll have to find out. We talked for another hour or so. Not about the past, but about the present and the future. About his work, about my patients, about books we'd read, movies we'd seen. Ordinary conversation between ordinary people with no ulterior motives. No tension, no understatement. When he was about to leave, I walked him to the door. Can I come back next Saturday? He asked, standing on the threshold. Just to talk. Maybe I could cook dinner. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to agree, to believe in his change of heart, to give us both a chance to rebuild our relationship. The other part was still hesitant, still afraid of more manipulation, more disappointment. Let's start small, I finally said. Why don't we just call first thing in the week? See how it goes. He nodded, showing no disappointment. Sure, Mom, whatever you say. He turned to leave, but I stopped him by putting my hand on his shoulder. Oddies, I said quietly. I want you to know that I've always loved you. Even when I was disappointed by your actions. Even when I was angry with you. Even when I couldn't forgive you. I have always loved you and I always will. He turned to me and I saw tears in his eyes. I know, Mom, he said in a shaky voice. And you don't deserve that love. But I'll try to earn it. He hugged me quickly, awkwardly, like he was afraid I'd push him away. Then he let go and walked away without looking back. I closed the door and leaned my back against it, feeling godly light. I didn't know if he was sincere in his remorse. I didn't know if it really changed, or if he just found a new way to get what he wanted. I didn't know if we could ever repair our relationship, rebuild the trust that had been broken. But I did know one thing. No matter what happened next, I would no longer be a victim. I would not let guilt drive my decisions. I would not sacrifice my well-being for a man who didn't appreciate those sacrifices. I will live my life, continue to do the work I love, take care of myself and my home, and if has truly changed, if he's ready to build a relationship based on mutual respect, without manipulation or expectations, well, I'll give him that chance, but just one. I woke up the next morning with a sense of newness. It was like turning a page, starting a new chapter of my life. A chapter in which I was not only Otis' mother, not only Harlan's widow, but above all Adeline Kenelm, a woman with her own desires, her own goals, her own dreams. I made breakfast and drank my coffee, looking out at the city, waking up outside my window. Then I got ready and went to work. To my patients, to my horses, to my vocation. The clinic was noisy and lively, as it always was on Saturdays. Kids with their parents, therapists, volunteers. Everyone was rushing around, talking, laughing. I walked to my office, changed into my work clothes, and headed to the stables. My favorite Evlita laughed when she saw me. I stroked her face and gave her a piece of apple. She nuzzled her warm nose against me, expressing her equine approval. "Good morning, Miss Kenel." Jason, the autistic boy I'd been working with for 3 years, called out to me. He was standing at the entrance to the stables, shuffling impatiently from foot to foot. "Are we riding Violet today?" "Sure, Jason," I smiled. "Vlita's waiting for you." I helped him put on his helmet, made sure the horse was all right, and checked the saddle. Then we went out to the area where the sessions were being held. I helped Jason onto Violet, showed him how to hold the race. "You ready?" I asked. He nodded, his face glowing with happiness and anticipation. "Then let's go." I led the horse in a circle, watching the boy carefully, his posture, his reactions. Gradually his body relaxed. His movements became more coordinated. His face more expressive. This always happened during the sessions, as if the contact with the horse, with its warmth, with its movements, was revealing something about these children, something that was usually hidden behind the walls of their peculiarities, their diagnosis. I looked at Jason, at his smile, at his glowing eyes, and felt a deep satisfaction. This was where I belonged. This is where I was valued, not for what I had, but for who I was, for my knowledge, my experience, my ability to connect children and horses in a healing dance. The session ended, and I helped Jason dismount. He hugged me quickly, awkwardly as always, and ran to his mother, who was waiting for him at the fence. I waved at her, and she smiled back. There was another session ahead, then lunch, then 2 more sessions. A normal workday filled with the usual joys and worries, but today everything seemed a little brighter, a little clearer, as if I was looking at the world through newly wiped glasses. I didn't know what the future would bring, whether Otis and I could rebuild our relationship, or whether our paths would finally part. Would he find the strength to change? Or would he fall back into old habits at the first hurdle? Would Eva trust him completely again? Or would a part of me always be wary? But I knew I could handle either outcome, because I finally realized that my worth is not defined by my relationship with me son. That my life doesn't end with my role as a mother. That I had a right to happiness, to peace of mind, to respect regardless of what others thought or said. I stroked Vlita's neck, thanking her for a job well done. She snorted softly and nudged me with her muzzle, begging for another apple. I laughed and took the treat out of my pocket. "You deserve it," I said, holding out Feeple in my open palm. Maybe I deserved it too. Deserved the right to be myself, the right to set boundaries, the right to say no when necessary, the right to live my life as I see fit. And when I realized that, I finally felt truly